"Oh, she was an angel," were the first few words by Doreen Erbert's second husband, Charles Erbert, during an interview about his departed wife. Everyone related to her knew how caring and gentle she was. But evil knows no kindness. Doreen always had a knack for giving to the community and helping others. Born as Doreen Ray Hitchens in Santa Clara, she was the fourth of 5 children. The family was tight-knit and loving, enjoying family activities such as fishing and camping. Doreen was described as an angel with a cheery attitude and generous spirit. Unlike most of us, these qualities weren't just temporary and led her to pursue a career in the medical field, and she went on to become a physical therapist. She was on her way to help even more people when she got a job and moved to the Bay Area. According to her family members, Doreen loved her work and was very involved in helping the community. It was during this job that she met Michael Dennis, who worked at Lockheed Factory as a sprayer. The factory was right next door to Doreen's workplace. When thinking about Mike and Doreen, you have to imagine them on a spectrum and put both on the extreme opposite ends to one another. This shows the difference between the personalities of the two. Mike was depressed, like any sprayer would be, and didn't really socialize a lot. His friends described him as confrontational and unhappy. The biggest reason was the fact that Mike suffered significant hearing loss as a child, which caused him to stutter. He also wore a hearing aid that was weird back in those days, and a component of it sat in your pocket. While Doreen, on the other hand, was jolly and fun, Mike was, well, the opposite. It was a perfect extrovert meets introvert case. He didn't often have girlfriends either, so he said he had found the one when he met Doreen. After only a few months of dating, both thought the next right move was to get married. On April 17, 1976, Doreen gave birth to their first and only child, a son, who was called Paul. The marriage wasn't perfect as the couple wasn't able to connect properly. Mike relished his role as a father, but the marriage didn't hold up well with the added stress of parenthood, and Mike was also being treated for depression. When Doreen didn't want to live with Mike's moodiness any longer, she filed for divorce in 1977. Doreen had custody of their son, but Mike would have him on the weekends. He was furious and bitter about their divorce, while Doreen was able to move on quickly. We all know that's never good when the ex is a crazy, soon-to-be psychopath. In 1978, Doreen was still working as a physical therapist. On one fortunate afternoon, while she was on her way home from work, her car broke down, and she pulled off to the side of the road. As luck would have it, Charles Erbert, a cheery-looking man with curly red hair, stopped to help Doreen. The two conversed under the hood of Doreen's car, and they hit it off instantly. Doreen found what she couldn't in Mike and realized what she was missing. Later that week, they had dinner together, and Doreen was impressed with Charles's stable life. He owned his own home and a successful carpet business, and soon the two were a couple. You don't let a guy like that go. They went on to marry later that year, and Doreen gave birth to a daughter, Deanna, in 1979. Soon after, Doreen quit her job as a physical therapist and became a secretary for Charles's carpet business, and by all outward appearances, they were a happy family. Mike used to visit Paul on the weekends, but he was still quite bitter about the divorce. Sadly, good times did not last for the blended family, and a nightmare was about to follow. In February 1980, while playing in the garden, Paul, Doreen's son from the first marriage, managed to get through the fence that was installed around the family's swimming pool. Doreen, who was watching him from the kitchen window while doing housework, became frantic when she could no longer see him. She rushed outside to find him. What she saw next was extremely heart-wrenching, something no mother should ever have to witness in her lifetime. Doreen came near the pool and saw Paul floating in it. He was taken to hospital and placed on life support. He remained on life support for a week before it was removed, and he died 3 days later, less than a month before his 4th birthday. It was a devastating event for the entire family, but it was especially painful for Mike. He was depressed, living alone, and didn't have a stable life. His only source of happiness was the weekends he spent with Paul. And now that was taken away from him too, which he blamed Doreen for. Because he struggled so much with women, to finally meet Doreen seemed to have a huge impact on his life. Losing her had an even bigger impact. Losing his son was catastrophic. Mike had been concerned about the swimming pool for some time. Doreen's dog had drowned in the same pool, and Mike had demanded a fence to be installed. He had even offered to front the cost. Such was his concern. He even went so far as to file a wrongful death suit against Charles and Doreen, and the case went to trial in March 1982. The jury ruled in Erbert's favor, and the couple cut off contact with Mike. His son's death would be the straw that broke the camel's back for Mike. He was demoted at work and would make claims that Paul's death was not an accident, but in fact, murder. He believed it was a calculated move to erase him from their lives, and he despaired that Doreen had gotten away with it. Erberts, on the other hand, were fighting their own battles. After Paul's death, the family was trying to pick up the pieces. They tried having another baby, but Doreen ended up having 2 miscarriages. In 1984, she got good news when she discovered she was pregnant again. As the pregnancy progressed, they found out that she was going to have a boy. The Erbert family was overjoyed after a long time. However, it wasn't going to last for long because the darkest cloud was yet to arrive. Mike had found out about the new baby, and he was still bitter over the whole thing. He got angrier. The baby was due in early November, just after Halloween. Doreen was under 5 feet tall, and as the birthday drew near, her sister teased her that she was as far out as she was high, according to court documents. On Halloween night, October 31st, 1984, Doreen took 4-year-old Deanna out trick-or-treating while Charles handed out candy at home. After Doreen brought Deanna back to the house, Charles went to get more candy and stopped by the liquor store. He would later estimate he was only away from the house for about 15 minutes, a little too late. Sometime around 9 p.m., there was a loud knock on the front door of the Erberts' home. According to the daughter, Deanna Scott, who was 4 years old at the time, said the knock was more aggressive than usual, so it couldn't have been her father. Doreen went to answer it, and when she opened it, there was a man in a wolf mask who said, "I'm going to kill you." In his hand was an 18-inch machete. Doreen told Deanna to run out of the house and hide. She also told the man to get out of the house. Because Doreen was so small and due in less than a month, she was no match for her frenzied ex-husband. Charles was about to arrive and witness the most horrifying thing he would ever see in his lifetime. Charles entered through the front door, which was open. He found Doreen lying on the floor of the living room entrance with severe cuts to her skull and the rest of her body. Her left hand was completely severed from above the wrist. The worst thing was the fact Doreen was about 8 months pregnant at the time. She was cut open and her fetus was removed and chopped. Yes, you heard that right. It was hacked to pieces. The unborn child died right at the scene. Charles witnessed all that when he entered the house. There was so much blood that Charles actually slipped and fell in it. Charles made his way to the telephone, and for some reason he could not get through to 911, so he called the fire department and a neighbor for help instead. Doreen was taken into the ambulance, but she also died on her way to the hospital. Multiple severe wounds led her to bleed to death. Luckily, there was a survivor, and Charles found Deanna still hiding in the living room. Fortunately, she had not seen any of the attacks. When first responders got to the scene, they discovered Charles hysterical with alcohol breath and covered in blood, so he became the first suspect. By the front door, they found a wolf mask. The wolf mask had big eyes, teeth, and a tongue sticking out. For some reason, the murderer had left it in the house. There was also a trail of blood leaving the Erbert house, trailing down the block. The police took blood samples from the home. During the course of the investigation that night, the police learned that Doreen had been married previously and that it was a contentious split. The police knocked on Mike's door. He didn't answer, but they heard running water and saw lights on. Mike finally answered the door. The police noticed that Mike had a bandage on his hand, and he told them he got the injury from playing with a knife. Because we all just play with knives in our free time, right? They also found blood around Mike's house, bloody gauze, and on some of his clothes. The police also had looked into his car with a flashlight and noticed blood on the steering wheel and gear shift. Mike was immediately under arrest for murder. The police did a second search at Mike's house. They found a receipt from a hardware store and a label for a machete with an 18-inch blade. In the garage, they found 2 handmade coffins and body bags. They suspected that Mike was going to kill Charles that night as well, but luckily, he wasn't home. Mike initially denied murdering his ex-wife, and despite the evidence at hand, it was not strong enough to hold him. He was released after 48 hours. However, he was arrested again on November 5, 1984, after a state crime matched Mike's blood type to that found at the crime scene. According to the Los Angeles Times, Mike was charged with murder with special circumstances, making him eligible for the death penalty. Detectives were also later able to trace the wolf mask found at the Erberts' home to one Mike wore to a Halloween party the previous year. The picture was shown in the court. In August 1988, Mike was convicted of first-degree murder of Doreen and the second-degree murder of her unborn child. The defense asked for a voluntary manslaughter conviction, stating that Mike was mentally ill. His attorney also said that he had taken a lesser-paying job in the days leading up to the murder, something that contributed to his depression. Mike went on trial in July 1988, and he ultimately pleaded guilty to first-degree murder for the death of Doreen and to second-degree murder for the death of her unborn fetus. In September 1999, he was sentenced to die in the gas chamber. Now 71 years old, he remains on death row at California Medical Facility in Vacaville, Solano County. Today, Charles and Deanna Scott say that they have forgiven Mike for their own peace of mind. Mike has said, "I want a new trial. If people knew what I've been through, the verdict would have been different." He has launched multiple appeals of his sentence, none of which have been successful and will probably never be.